everybody doing this evening?
How y'all doing?
We are starting a series, and it's all about the female guppy. And the reason I chose this, or we chose this series, is because there's so many more details that has to go with the female guppy than the male guppy. And to help tell us all of this with more of the specifics and in layman's terms, Alex from The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. I got that wrong on the tag. I did Secret Life, and I think I was listening to Daniken, and then I went to do our thumbnail, and so I got all confused. But that's okay. It's still good. Yeah, right. So he should be up here any minute.
Yep.
And I swear, if I have time, maybe this week I'll have some time to actually get like a intro to that song. And that way it's just not, whatever. But yeah, I really like that to go with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so he had to run and go meet his wife to get his headphones. Apparently they were in the car, and he said that she's about a block away.
Okay.
So he'll be in here in a minute, so we can just carry on.
All right.
I did. Hey, Fishymon, how are you doing?
Fishymon, what's up?
I hate to say anything because I'd like him to kind of start it out right.
Well, we can talk about something else.
Yeah, so you know more about the weather than I do because we were talking earlier, and you said that we possibly have 2 more hurricanes headed this way.
There's definitely one on the way right now. We'll be hitting this Wednesday. Supposed to hit right through New Orleans.
Again. And so that means I will get I'll get the west side of it then.
I think it's going from New Orleans going up like towards Tennessee. I don't think you can get any of this.
Well, that's good because I haven't seen sun in 3 or 4 days now. I mean, that cold front came through, and then it has been cloudy and yucky and drizzling. I mean, it's been chilly. I don't like that. I live in the South. It ain't supposed to get cold. Yeah, I don't like that.
Cool down there too.
I don't like it.
Right now I'm in Venice in the path of the storm.
Yeah.
The 5th storm to hit Louisiana, the 9th storm in the Gulf.
Yeah. They and maybe the 3rd one to hit Louisiana this year.
No, this will be the 4th.
The 4th.
5th. They've had 4 already.
Oh.
This will be the 5th one to hit Louisiana.
Dragon Layers in Alabama. Cool. I didn't know you were in Alabama, Dragon Layer. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in the path there too, Dragon Layer.
Yep. Hat Trick, I thought you was headed to go get a pony.
Chevy Fish, hello, welcome.
But yeah, so at least, I mean, I hate that it's hitting y'all, but at least it'll give me a break.
Yeah, y'all had 2 big ones up there.
Yeah, we've gotten hit a lot. All right. Well, it looks like the main man of the day or night has made it with his headphones, and I'm fixing to bring him up.
Hello.
Hello. What's up, Alex?
Oh, not too much. Technical difficulties right before I start, just pretty much like every live stream I do.
Same here.
I got them though. I got the headphones.
It's what makes it interesting.
We own like 6 pairs, and of course, we've had like one that we know where it's at for the last 6 months, and then my wife goes on a jog every night, and then it goes missing, and so I just ran down, got a slight jog myself. If I sound out of breath, probably doesn't help.
Oh, No biggie.
Yeah.
I think it's weird. It's dark here, but we're looking at you in the sunlight.
Oh no, it's sun setting right now as we speak. So
Yes.
it's
Wow.
I've got a backup light right now, but I'll move inside in a moment. I'm just finishing up meeting her with the headphones, and so
I hear you.
yeah.
I hear you.
How's everybody doing?
Oh,
I'm doing good. Yeah, doing good.
Good. Seeing who's in the chat real quick. We got Muppet, All in Tanks, Hat Trick, Chevy, Cav. Right on. Good people.
Hey, Hat Trick said she's headed out Wednesday. They have a Shetland pony that's been standing stud in Indiana, and it's going. Oh, okay. So it's going to a horse auction, and y'all are going there to buy it. I get it. Okay. Cool. I used to have one. That's what my son's first horse was a well, he was a mini, or she was a mini. Anyway, back to fish. Back to fish.
I don't know much about horses. I've ridden them a few times.
Yeah. Well, if you ever can make it this way, I'll put you on one too.
All right. I like Tennessee walking horses. Those are the is that what they're called, Tennessee? Well,
yeah. Well, those are walking horses. I have quarter horses, which mine are, a little shorter and wider.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
They need to be a lot wider to hold me.
No. I've got that's what quarter horses are made for. They can hold some weight. They can hold some weight. And agility. They can hold weight with and have agility, which is awesome.
That's kind of like me.
Oh, Hytrick said they already own him. Then maybe buying another saddlebred at the auction. Awesome. Where is the auction at? Anyway, she'll answer me back. So, Alex, I wanted you to come up and us start a queen, the female guppy, as she is, and why she is. My brain is like a sponge right now, and I just can't get enough information on them. And thank God
is the sponge wet or dry?
Well, I hope it's dry. I mean, wet because it's in my brain, but it's wanting some more. So,
all right.
So, if you would start out telling us a little background, just a little background of where the guppy first came from, found.
Yeah. So,
it's in England, right?
Well, no, actually. So, no? Well, it's a long story, but I'll condense it as best I can. Okay.
Okay.
So, essentially, Trinidad and Tobago are islands off the coast of Venezuela in the Mediterranean, and this is where we first found them into the Western world. I suppose you'd call it the Western world. Then, at the time, it was under British control, the area, and there was a man named John Le Chamere Guppy, who was half French, half British. And because the area was controlled by Spanish, British, French, and I think Portuguese also had some territory. Anyways, so this was in the early 1800s originally that they first noticed these little fish. And by the mid-1800s, there had been a big expo in France. So in 1854, there was a big expo in France about fish. And it was the first freshwater and saltwater, any type of water, public aquarium exhibit. And so Europe and the world kind of went crazy over this idea because they didn't have photos back then, but there were woodblock carvings reproduced in newspapers all over the world. So from Australia to Hong Kong to New York and Chicago, the news spread that there's this new hobby or new science of keeping fish in glass boxes. And before that, there had been a little bit of fish keeping, but it was really in ponds or in goldfish bowls made out of porcelain.
how would they make the aquariums per se back then?
So back then, they were able to work with glass, but they would usually use lead or cast iron, and they would slide sheets of glass in, and it was very, very shallow because the glass wasn't so strong. So they'd make these big, shallow aquariums,
Oh.
and they would oftentimes have wood on a few sides, and then maybe two sides of glass, or a sheet of glass just on one piece.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of queens, there was a woman named Jeanne Villepreux-Palais, and she was the woman who invented the term aquarium. She was a French woman born a peasant, and she married an Englishman, and they studied cone snails and octopus and cuttlefish. And so when they started studying them in the late or I guess it was the early 1800s, they had to take them home, obviously. And she was tired of studying them dead, because that's how science was done in the 1700s, was they would study dead specimens. They'd put them in jars of alcohol, or,
so they didn't smell.
Right, and so they didn't rot. And then they would sketch them and make guesses about things. Well, she said, we don't understand these creatures. We need a science of this stuff.
Yeah.
We need to know what they do when they're alive. And so she basically built ponds in boxes without glass first, and then later with glass. And she was born very poor, but by the age of 18, she had walked from the suburbs of Paris and made friends with the royal family in France. And this was right after Napoleon had happened, and so they just had the big democratic revolution, and the Louisiana Purchase had just gone on, and it was a crazy time. So the royal family, a lot of them had been murdered, and so they still had money, but they kind of needed to go in exile. So she moved over to England, and she buddied up with one of the women her age in the royal family, and became self-taught, the first real aquarist, if you want to call her that. Mm-hmm. And later on, she didn't really get too much credit for it. Her husband did, but
of course.
And the other unfortunate thing was, in the 1870s, her entire life's work, she was on a ship going to Greece, I think, and the ship crashed. And everyone on the ship survived, but all of her papers for 60 years of research and illustrations all went down with the ship, and a bunch of specimens. So she was very instrumental, though, and put out several books, both in her name and in pseudonyms, because women couldn't publish even legally in some countries back then. So speaking, of the Queen thing, I thought that might be an interesting little piece of the story, because she's kind of the one who kickstarted that being a hobby with the elites of the time.
And that was in Trinidad? Did she live in Trinidad?
She lived first in France, then she lived in England.
Okay.
And so in England, she met a guy by the name of John Lishimere Guppy, as well as about a dozen other people who kind of started the first two aquariums, which were first in Paris, which was just an exhibition for a weekend, and then in London, and that's the oldest aquarium in the world, arguably Berlin too. So between Berlin and London, that whole time kind of kicked off all these royal family folks being into fish. At the time, they were keeping things just like Wells catfish from Europe and local fish that they'd go catch in the day, and maybe they didn't even expect them to live for more than 2 or 3 days. But they were on exhibition for the public, and they just kind of burned through them. So they were learning, and they during this time, then John Leshemere Guppy, he goes over to he traveled the whole world actually, but he goes over to Trinidad and Tobago, however you want to say it, and he is the governor's son. And so he basically just runs around doing whatever he wants. And him and a few other folks went out and they found these little fish. And they were colorful. They were like little orange and light blue fish, kind of like the El Tigre or the red star endlers that you see today.
Mm-hmm.
And they discover these things and they take them back. They found them in a lagoon in Trinidad, and then they also found them on the mainland in Venezuela. And it's not quite clear where all they found them. In fact, it's a big argument still. But they found endlers, live bears, that is, endlers live bears, and they found guppies and hybrids of them. And it wasn't until I think the 1960s or 70s that they actually sorted out that the endlers were their own species. But there was a group of these fish, long story short, and they took them back to the island, and from the island he distributed them to people in the port of importance. So that was another stop off for a lot of people taking silver and gold out of South America back to Europe. And so with those ships, which were well-equipped, very sturdy ships, they took specimens of the guppies in the mid to late 1800s back with them. And some of the coolest, most unmessed with DNA we have is actually from places like Germany and France, where these rich people threw guppies in their ponds on their estate and just let them live. But in any case, so the guppy makes its way back to Europe. From Europe, it makes its way to Australia, and then from Trinidad, it goes up to the Americas. And they realize that this fish is really, really sturdy. You know, New Orleans is another big city that ends up taking in a whole bunch of guppies early on, and it was kind of a fashion thing for your well-to-do families to have a parlor room with a bowl full of guppies. and at the same exact time, you had scientists and doctors after this American Civil War who malaria had decimated a lot of places, especially as troops were in the Deep South. Malaria was killing more people than battle at certain places. And they needed to get rid of the mosquitoes. They knew that much. So they put these little fish everywhere because they breed so prolifically. Right. Especially wild guppies. Wild guppies can have up to like 300 babies. Wow. You know, and so they're just really crazy prolific in a year. And then those babies obviously grow up. Within 3 months, they can reach sexual maturity. So, and then they can have more babies. Right. And so we're finding out, and we'll talk about it tonight. Yeah. We'll find out why they're so successful in being able to survive. Why it is that you can take 2 guppies and start a colony that's not completely beyond hope inbred. I mean, ideally, you want to start with as big of a group as you can, but in many cases they took 2, 4, 3, whatever it was, guppies, and they'd start a colony or a line from it, and thousands and thousands of fish would stem from that. And there are ways that the guppy inherently, specifically the female guppy, is able to know who is her closest genetic match. Because the problem with inbreeding is not necessarily that you will be having genetic problems or you will be inbred if you breed with, say, let's put it in human terms just to make it easy, because I could say F1 and F2 and all that stuff, but
right, layman's terms.
Yeah, so let's put it in human terms. So let's say that you have a guppy, it has babies, and it has a trait that you want that first mother had. So or father, either way, whatever. So you take those babies and you take the one with the best version of that trait, and you'd breed it back with that mother or the father. Then they would have babies, and so now you have 3 different groups of them age-wise. You know, the 2 adults and 2 different groups of juveniles, and then you'd select from all those the best with the traits. So you're keeping these groups separate if you're a breeder, and this is what they did. And so you've got, you know, basic selection for traits. And guppies in themselves, they will mate if you put them together. Just 2 of them, they're gonna mate. But almost always, there are some exceptions to that, but almost always they'll mate. And the reason that they don't get so inbred and have messed up spines as quickly as almost any other group of fish, which, believe me, they do. We see that a lot with fancy species or fancy versions.
Right.
And that's because humans say, you two, you're stuck together, you're going to breed together. And after a month, they decide, okay, we're going to breed together. We're all that's left, you know?
Right.
But in the wild, they actually have pheromones that let each other know, you are too similar to me. You smell like me. And we have genes that are too similar, because the real problem with inbreeding is that not necessarily that there's anything wrong with the genes from the get-go, but it's if there is a problem, the chance of a recessive rare problem is almost assured when it's been passed on to the baby and then the parent had it too. So if the disorder is for the guppy to have a crooked spine, and it can't swim and survive, you know, more than, say, a couple months. Because if it's too bad of a deformity, it just dies. That's the end of it, and you don't see it. Yeah. So the female guppies can smell on the males. It's actually similar in humans, we found, with body odor. So if you don't like someone's body odor and it's very offensive to you, there's a high likelihood statistically that you share a lot of genes in a certain area of your genome that are responsible for things like Down syndrome and autism, and there's a host of different disorders, as well as, you know, spinal deformations and things. So even humans have a slight aversion to it.
But Alex,
which is,
don't we cover our natural smell up though? So
we do.
It would have to go back to kind of like the basics to be able to do that. Like if they did a study or whatever on it, right?
Right. That's exactly right. They had to make sure nobody was wearing perfume, and beyond that, they found that birth control threw off a woman's sense of smell. So most women, when they're asked, they rate their teenage sons in particular, their BO. They say there's a point in time when their son, usually around puberty, stinks. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, man, my son, his clothes just smell awful. You know, he's sweating or whatever.
Right.
And it's not always the case, but it's very common.
Right.
And they've found, you know, that's probably one of the ways in which our species, you know, would know without having to be told. As taboo as those things are culturally as well.
Right.
But so the kind of interesting part with guppies is they will be able to figure out the best way. They will forego all their other instincts that the females have for color selection, the most fit male, any of that. They'll forego that in order to have babies with the most genetically different male present if they're in a small number.
Wow.
However, if you move those guppies, like they did in this study that lasted 20 years, conducted out of the University of British Columbia, if you move those guppies into a big pond afterwards, then they totally go back to the, oh, I want the male with the most black spots and the biggest orange patch. So
all right.
we'll
speaking of that, speaking of that, why don't we start at, first of all, let everybody know that Alex does have a Patreon account, and my mods are trying to get that pulled up, and if y'all don't mind, help him out. Help him out for me and for us. So for him coming on and doing this for everybody, I mean, it's a lot of knowledge and it's usable, I think. So y'all help him out and go to his Patreon account and help him out that way.
I just wanted to say real quick too, I noticed in the chat people saying, I thought fish keeping started in Egypt or wherever. So this wasn't the start of fish keeping. This was the start of the aquarium as we know it, tropical freshwater fish keeping and saltwater. But before that, all the way back to the Romans, the Egyptians, Mesopotamia, and China all independently kept fish in different ways. I mean, the goldfish has been around for probably about 1,500 years as a human-altered animal. So just wanted to throw that out there in the chat. Yeah. So you weren't wrong, whoever said that. You know, I'm just talking about keeping them in a glass box, like we think of today as the hobby.
Right. So do they still have the like first original tank, like the oldest tank?
They have a bunch of the old tanks in both Paris, London, Berlin, and in the United States, it's actually in Chicago, the Shed Aquarium.
Wow.
And I believe, well, I don't want to say what date because I can't remember for sure, but it's mid to late 1800s when it opened, and you can still go there, and it's like a round building kind of. I went there years ago, and you go in there, and there's glass panels. So you look at it from kind of like little portholes or glass windows looking in. And they've updated some things, but I mean, the bones of the building, the old part, are still original. And back then, they really decorated the tanks really ornately too. This was not a hobby for your average person at first. Right. This was a hobby for well-to-do people because you have to remember these fish are coming from, you know, wherever. So... and back then you had to take the slow ship to nowhere, you know?
Yeah.
So we're talking about sometimes to get the guppies back, it wasn't a matter of put them in a bag and give them some air and make sure the ammonia's okay. It was a matter of bringing, 100 gallons of fresh water, keeping 50 of them in a 10-gallon container, changing that water, and actually they knew about oxygenation. So they had a billows like you'd use on a fire, and they'd actually have to pump that. And there was a person tasked on the boat with changing out the water of the fish, with aerating the tank, and with feeding them and scooping out any stuff.
But that would be saltwater. If they would they be crossing the ocean?
Well, they'd have to bring the fresh water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was quite the task, when it took a month to do that.
Ray, so this. A quick question.
Oh yeah, what's that? I can hop. I can pull it up. Actually,
put it up on screen.
Let's see here, Alex. Doesn't the genes for color in guppies is on the male chromosome, and the females don't contribute to color pattern? No. So there's actually. Okay, that's a loaded question, but so forget about which chromosome it's on right now, because what you want to know is who in the tank, if left to their own devices, gets to decide how the color got there, and that's the females. The males are gonna breed with every female they can. They're very persistent. However, the females have the ability to deny the males access, which is very unlike most fish or most other species of animals, and for that matter. The male kind of has its way in a lot of animals, whereas with guppies, the female may have been mated with 5 or 6 times, and she can decide, I hated those first 4 guys, I'm going with the 5th out of the 6 guys. And that's what then will determine color by default, because she picked it, So we won't go into I have a chart that I was going to show you guys in a bit, but basically there's 4 genes in most guppies that are all at play to determine color, or alleles, I should say. There's 4 alleles. And so you've basically, the easiest way to think about it, just to keep it surface level right now, and if you know a lot about this subject and you're listening, you might be a little frustrated. I know how it works. Don't worry. I'm just trying to make it easier right now. But
Right.
it's kind of like paints. So it's kind of like a printer, and guppies have a black gene, which is, for the black pigment. They have the blue gene, and then they have a reddish orange or purple kind of color gene, or not gene, sorry, pigmentation, I should say. But it's a gene that codes for it. And then they also have a blue pigmentation. And then there's another morph known as blonde, which we see as kind of whitish yellow, or leucistic animals. Like when you see a corn snake that's yellow and white, rather than its normal colors. It's not quite albino. It doesn't have the red eyes, but leucistic animals have an absence of the darker colors. They only have usually slight red, orange, and yellow and white. So they're missing that blue, the purples, and the blacks usually. So, or browns. But it's very similar to a TV or a printer in that you've got these 4 base colors, and it's combinations of those colors in different amounts in 4 different layers of skin that overlap and are translucent, that give you the colors that we see with our eye. Under the microscope, you actually see layers of skin and scales that have different pigment cells in them. And those pigment cells are selected for by the genes. And yes, a lot of the color genes are on the male chromosome, but they're picked by the female, if that makes sense.
Right. And so before we get too much further off into that, we need to back up and start off with the first off of breeding. When a female is of age and she's ready to pick her male.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there.
Okay. So when the female is ready to spawn, she will look for the male in the tank, ideally, and she'll watch him. So she'll watch him, and she'll find the male that usually there's 2 kinds of males that a female guppy will go for. And that is either the quiet, slow one that reserves its or let me tell it this way. There's 2 kinds of males guppies for the most part. There's the ones that mature very quickly, like in 2 to 3 months they start getting their color patterns. And they get very big and big fins and bright colors very young in life. However, they tend to be more boisterous, more outgoing. They're the ones that hassle the females all the time when you see them in the tank. Yeah. And they always are doing their mating dance, their little turn to the side and flex, and then they kind of vibrate or shimmy for a while. Mm-hmm. They do that all the time, and they use a ton of energy to do that. So right. In the wild, they have a limited amount of energy, and they also have other animals, from birds to fish, eating them. So when they shimmy, it's all a big gamble evolutionarily in what's better. Do you want to be the male who looks good and dances and is the best looking, but you look like a fishing lure to everything in the pond? Or do you want to be that other male who sits back, lets those males get eaten, and is the last to mate with the females at 5 months old? And maybe he's not the best colored male, but he's the quickest, and he hides, and he gets the food the best because, he knows to leave the group and not follow the big, school or shoal of guppies. Right. So you kind of get these loner males that look like females until a very long age. We call them sneaker males in the hobby, but they're also known as alpha males and beta males or beta males. And it's just the notion, it's 2 different styles of evolutionary adaptation. You know, it's two ways that they've decided that. So the female has to choose, and the female has in the wild the ultimate choice, which is she may not be able to fend off all males from mating with her, which is a bummer, I guess, if you're a woman, right?
Yeah.
If you just have to say, okay, fine.
Right.
And so in your tank, you see this if you've had 3 males and a female or something, or even if you have a couple females, but there's one female that all the males want.
Mm-hmm.
So the males will go for her, and you'll see 3 or 4 males swarming this poor female, and she's always trying to get away from them. Well, she does that for a while, but there may be one that she says, you know, that's the one that I actually want to spawn with. And if she has her choice in the tank, she'll allow them to spawn with her, but she'll store their DNA, their sperm, in her oviducts, and then the one that she thought was the best, which there's the 2 strategies, and so she picks one of those 2 strategies. And so what you see in the wild is either iridescent or kind of pearl scale small males that are fast, very reactive, kind of skittish, and they live longer. They may live 3 years, and they tend to have very, very good nutrition, and they tend to produce lots of, you know, good fertility, low defect rate. Or you tend to have the male who is big, flashy, full of color, and in guppies, what that color is from carotenoids, just like carrots, you know, beta carotene and things, and keratin in your fingernails. They're all kind of loosely related in the chemical world, but basically, it's from a fruit that falls in their traditional range. That's an orange fruit.
Right.
And the orange fruit is what they eat to get their essential vitamins and minerals. They will die without these. Now, these days it's in their fish food, and it's no big deal for us to give it to them. But in the wild, they're lacking this really badly unless they eat that fallen, rotting fruit. And so the females want the male with all the orange because it shows that both he had the gene for the orange, but he also has been eating it because he won't color up without it. And so it also, then the male that lives the longest, though, has been eating all the omega fatty acids. So that means that he's been eating all the little bugs. He's had access to the bugs. So he's outcompeted or outsmarted the other males. He's maybe found a source that they don't eat from, you know. Just like when you feed your guppies, sometimes you may notice that, like, most of them all swarm in one corner, and sometimes you got 1 or 2 that are just kind of cruising in the other corner, and you're like, what are you doing? And it's just part of that. There's 2 tactics. And also by default for the whole species, what that does is that also gives you 2 different time periods in which the males will be spawning with the females. So you have different waves of babies all throughout the year. And that way, if, say, a big bass gets in their little section of the pond and eats all the babies up, you've got another round of babies coming a month later. So, you know, in the wild, you've got the 2 main, there's way more strategies than 2, but the basics of it is either lots of babies really, really fast that you don't take care of, or few babies that you guard with your life and make sure they get to adulthood and put all your resources towards that, you know? And those are kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. So guppies chose tons of babies all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause you for just a second. I'm gonna put this up on the screen. I don't know if you can read it or not, but Dead Fred said that Joseph's Tropical Tanks has a comment with what looks like a bruise on it. A comment, I guess a goldfish.
Yeah.
He wants to know if you take a look at it.
I think he was directing that question to Shattered Fish.
It was up on his last video, I guess.
Yeah, I think he was. I think Dead Fred was directing that to Shattered Fish.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm behind. I was trying to help.
Yeah, no problem.
Never mind. Just trying to help. Okay.
Oh, okay. It was to Chevy. Okay, I got it. I see it.
Yeah.
No worries. So the females basically, I've touched on this before, but we'll say it again because I think it's incredible new science that we've just learned, which is that the female is able to store in herself, she's basically got what looks like a saddle, organ-wise, in her back, and it looks like kind of like female ovaries are shaped in a female human. She's got these ducts. They're not actual ovaries. They're called oviducts, and they're kind of like waiting rooms, like fallopian tubes to the ovaries. And what they are is she's able to then store every male that's mated with her successfully, whether she wanted it or not. If he was able to mate with her and it's now inside of her, she stores that. But she has the ability to push it out within about 10 minutes if she wants. But the problem is, just they're so persistent that this happens all the time. So the male won't stop until she puts out a pheromone that says, "Okay, dude, I got your gift, okay? Leave me alone." So it's basically like a lock and key enzyme that matches to that male. And so there's a way for them to know biologically, okay, good, I got that female pregnant. I can move on and try to get as many other ones pregnant as possible now. So they'll kind of cool their jets after a while with her, until she has babies, and then it starts all over again. So this new research, though, they've found that the females are actually able to take that sperm inside of them and know in which order they mated with which male. So they know, okay, that male may have been the one that was sneaky. He wasn't colorful, but the other two dads are dead. They got eaten by bass in the last 3 days. So I don't like their DNA anymore, So what she does is, inside biologically, they think that she's using a protein tag scheme, biologically speaking, which is basically like a ball and chain. So if you think about your cartoon drawing of a little sperm, it's like putting weights on their tail. And it doesn't work quite like that, but let's just go with that for now, okay? So it's like putting a ball and chain on the tail of the sperm. So if there was a male that she just they think it's about 6 different males that they can discern from and store, because females will store every male. If you put a female and a male guppy of reproduction age together, she can have babies the rest of her life from that one encounter. She will store the sperm in her, and it is viable. She will keep those cells alive for a year and a half or however long need be. So I've had female guppies alone in a tank have up to 5 batches of babies over a 2-year period without any males in there. I take the fry out.
Right.
And they think that it could go up to as many as 8, but they're pretty confident about 6 different times.
Wow.
So that female then, once she's got the different males she's mated with, she takes the ones that had, the best quality stuff, by their looks, their colors, all that, and she then decides the guys that are lowest ranking, they may get this stress-induced enzyme, and it'll go in her oviducts, and it'll latch on to those sperm tails, and it'll say, you guys aren't going to, it makes it so the sperm can't swim fast. It ruins their motility, as it's called. And so just like in humans, that's important for which one gets to the egg first in the body. And so she is able to say, I didn't like these guys. So the biggest loser who got eaten by the bass right away, and he didn't have that good a color anyways, I'm going to put 8 of these molecules on the tail of this sperm or whatever,
Right.
Whereas maybe the next up gets 3. And then maybe the one she wanted to mate with, she doesn't have that stress hormone interact with those sperm at all, and so they aren't. Their motility nor their efficacy is not dealt with at all. And they don't know this part for sure genetically. This is brand new science the last 2 years, 3 years. But it could be that there's also a chemical that makes it so the sperm just die, so maybe there's just not as many of certain ones. It could be that it's makes them confused essentially, and they don't know how to swim towards the chemical marker that tells them there's an egg present. So there may be several things going on, but for right now, let's just think of it as a ball and chain on the tail. And so then when she's ready to ovulate and she takes her eggs inside her body in her ovaries, and she has 2 ovaries and 2 oviducts on either side, and then they come together in the middle. And essentially she then gets to decide, okay, release all the sperm, and the fastest swimming ones are going to be the ones from that male with the best orange color, who lived the longest, who had the best access to vitamins, who didn't smell like her, he wasn't stinky, and in that way she's selected, least likely to have genetic defects, most likely to have access to food, and most adept at outcompeting the other male fish in the area. And so that then is pretty incredible in my mind, that they're able to do that. Especially, that's all done without thinking necessarily, as we think of it.
Right on.
So
very interesting.
That's the mechanics of wild guppies. I was thinking if the plan was to go to Chubb's channel after this, I was going to talk a little bit about the genes and color selection, and I've got some charts of when we interfere and we say, you guys are pairing up, we want this color out of these guppies, and we can talk about that over there. But maybe we can kind of finish up if people have any questions, or if y'all want to talk about anything.
Sure.
Kind of.
Yeah. If anybody's got questions, they can do that. I am just I'm just floored at how long she can hold them and choose later on to either keep or get rid of a certain spawn, I guess.
Yes. Researchers didn't believe it at first. Literally, there's a professor out of University of British Columbia, and he published his assumptions based on what he saw in this pond that they've been keeping, well, a set of ponds they've been keeping in Trinidad for, I think it's like 30 years the university's been involved with studying them. And the other researchers didn't believe it around the world. They were like, that sounds way too complex. That's pretty far-fetched. So then they went back in. This was in the last 10 years. They've been confirming that and trying to sort out what exactly is going on. And so the information I'm speaking off of is peer-reviewed scientific articles, but there's still some uncertainty where they're like, we don't know if it's really a ball and chain on the tail of the sperm, or if it's, a chemical that makes it slower or whatever.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, smell makes sense. It's certain smells that would make sense.
Yes.
The yellow or the orange dot, that just blows my mind. That's like, really? But it's awesome.
Well,
I just think it's cool.
Think about this too. So flamingos are pink because of the krill and the iodine that they eat in the shrimp and krill that they eat. So the most pink flamingos clearly had access to the most food with the highest iodine content.
Right.
So the females will say, that guy has the best access to resources. And in the world, in theory, it's either limited resources or accessing those resources has a cost, which is danger. You could get eaten. And the
Wow.
name of the game in evolution is to survive. So and the way I'm talking makes it sound like evolution is a thing that has an end goal. And it's important to note that it has no will
No.
or end goal. Evolution it's not like some guided by some necessarily principle. It's just essentially the other ones are dead, so what's alive is what's going to work.
Right. I'm going to put this up here. Dead Fred, he said, let's be thankful human ovaries haven't figured this out, honey. Remember the milkman? That's right.
Oh boy.
You're a mess.
Derek left a comment that had me rolling earlier too. Fred.
Oh, I missed it.
Fred. Oh no, I mean on my channel earlier today.
Oh, okay.
So, he's a witty one.
Yes, for sure. Well, if anybody else doesn't have any questions, I do not mind going ahead and swapping over and continuing the conversation.
Homework. I have homework to give you guys.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, I will go ahead and say, okay, so the contest is, or the drawing or whatever, the rules are you have to
select a mate.
Yeah. Now you have to make an appearance in chat at all the 3 series to be qualified to get in the drawing, which is not really a drawing because I think what we've chose to do is do questions, right, Chubbs?
Yeah.
So I think it was. Oh, I'll let you explain how it was.
We're going to make 3 questions for each episode, and then each stream. We'll pick 3 questions, and then the last stream we'll do like questionnaire type, multiple choice, I guess. Whoever gets all the questions right from all 3 streams is going to. Well, there's 2 or 3. We'll have like a sudden death. We'll get it to 1.
Yeah. We'll just keep asking questions until we get down to the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how that's going to go. Yeah, I have found. Fish Dreams has got a question. Why do most imported guppies have the red spot, and why do they tend to die in our aquariums?
Well, so this is 2 unrelated, kind of unrelated things, but essentially, most guppies that are imported are in these massive ponds outside, unless they're very high-end guppies. And so they basically take 20 guppies that are of a strain that's already been established and been around a while, and they throw them in a big pond of water in Thailand, Indonesia, wherever. And over there, compared to, they do it in Florida too, but over there, it's very inexpensive land, labor, and then the heat is free, so they don't have to pay to heat the pond. The food is from bugs, so they will supplement the food, but they don't need to add food to the ponds like you would indoors, in New York if you were spawning guppies there, or in Europe. And so essentially, over time, the same thing happens in a season. The females pick the ones with the most orange. Part of it's also trends right now is we do have a trend towards those big, the albino ones that look like koi kind of. Those are very popular. We had the red pandas, we had the red lace, we had all these red variations. And that was just a taste in the market that was happening. But if you're seeing those kind of feeder guppies or endlers that are kind of your just quote-unquote assorted guppies, those are all pretty much mass farmed. And so nature does take its course there, and they will select, even if it's like 50 blue males and 2 orange ones, you're going to see, you're going to see a lot of blue, but you're going to see that orange disproportionately present in the population of those babies. So that's the color part, as well as the trend for orange and red fish lately. They've been able to. They know that they're able to basically force feed these fish before they send them off for sale, and they hold that crazy red color really well from carotenoids in their diet. And so fish food makes a huge difference, or live food for that matter, like brine shrimp, will make a huge difference in the color of your fish, specifically the color orange and red. So the last part of that is that the reason they die is because they have totally different water parameters, and you get, for one, you have them living overseas, and then you have they have to take, it could be brackish water, and they live in these big ponds. They're not looked after individually. They could have diseases, so then they mass treat with medications, and they overdose those medications frequently, and then they pull them out, and a good amount will die in transit or in the pond, and nobody's checking them for back defects and other genetic things that still do slip in. And then finally, they get to a distributor like Seagrest or Imperial, 5D, or a transshipper in the US. Then they make their way to a pet store or to a dealer, maybe an online dealer or an independent dealer. So they've gone through 3 different people's hands. They've been in 2 planes and a car usually, if not more, or a truck. And they've had to acclimate to at least 3 or 4 different types of water in that time, and it's very stressful for them. And the other part of that is just that the more fancy a guppy is, the more likely it is to have inbreeding, and the more likely that we don't select as a hobby. It's very recent that it's popular to select for healthy individuals. We cared about the biggest fins, the best color. We don't really care about the longest living, most healthy, straightest spine, smartest guppies.
Yeah.
Right.
And Fred said, from what I understand, human sperm is nearly as complicated. Some attack competing sperm, some boost fellow swimmers. Yeah, so we're learning a lot about that right now, too. We're learning that they are actually quite the complex little cell, and they do, they do quite the bit of swimming, and, they put out chemicals that make the other ones slower. They sometimes there's some that are basically kamikazes, and they just go and mess with other ones. So we don't quite understand what all's going on, but there's a lot of stuff going on,
Oh, yeah.
And it's an exciting time to be alive.
And, get the other stream going.
Yeah.
I'll see y'all all there soon.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. See y'all in a little bit. Appreciate everybody in chat.
See you in a minute.
Oh, what's up?
All right, so Dead Fred still has a question up here, or a comment. He said most farm guppies are bred in brackish water.
Yeah, it's like you were saying. Or no?
Yeah. And then they have to shock acclimate to our freshwater aquariums. Aftershock acclimating to the IFS waters. Don't know about the spots.
The local fish store waters.
Okay.
So like I said, they have 3 spots.
3, yes.
With different water. And they also use this trick where they put, they use several chemicals, but they basically put chemicals to slow down their metabolism and make it so that a lot of times they'll give them basically a laxative that makes them go to the bathroom right before they bag them up. And then they'll put them in the bag, and then they'll give them a chemical that makes them sleepy and kind of slows down their digestion and everything. Now, that
can't be too terribly bad, though. I mean...
Well, it saves a lot of fish.
Right.
It saves a lot of fish along the way.
Right.
But it's not... It's like going to surgery as a human,
Right.
It's like, that might fix your problems and prevent the death that was impending, but it doesn't mean you're going to heal up completely fine all the time. Anesthesia can make you real nauseous. It can, it can just run you down. So
Right. Yeah.
It's a give and take.
Right.
Figuring out how much of that to do.
Right. That's right.
But ideally, you want to buy from a small batch breeder who's checking on the fry, saying like, okay, this one's okay, that one we need to cull. And that's another hard part for a lot of people is culling.
Yes,
you gotta
culling.
Gotta kill.
And that's what I have been doing a lot lately, because I'm not letting anything go out of here unless it is top of the line. And so culling on my end lately, I mean, like I said, it's just been nonstop. And that's why I don't have so many for sale yet, because I'm just not going to let them go until they're right. Until I know that what I have gotten in from a transporter is going to breed right, and it's going to, look good. And, I'm the middleman, I guess, on that part of it.
Sure.
I just sent back a whole batch, probably 3 generations of guppies, because they did not breed right.
Wow.
Sent them back, and they credited me back. But
was that like they weren't breeding true with what the line was supposed to be?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Correct.
That's why I like this new trend the last 20 years or so they've been working towards, of getting color into the females.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can kind of double check, like, is my female the right strain? Because for years it's been the case that you're like, the female has no color pretty much.
Right.
And so you're like, I don't know, one of the females got stuck on a net or a piece of plant, and a little baby grows up, and then you got a female in the wrong tank, and it's trouble.
Yeah, because you don't know what they are, because no colors. But yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you guys, of course, we're not monetized yet. We're working on it. But I do have a PayPal account, and if you would like to help me out in that direction. And then Alex has Patreon, and I'm not sure if Chubbs does or not, but we'll ask him when we get over there. So we're going to shut this one down, and we're all going to move over to Chubbs and continue this great conversation.
And I'll say, I'd rather that you guys get the donations. My channel's monetized, so if you guys wanted to give something to me, come watch some videos. It's free, and then help their channel out. Well, you got me
hooked, so they're nonstop. So,
sure.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all later.
Right.
Let's go
see
on
you guys over there in a minute.